In December 1944, the Empire of Japan made a decision. It was not a tactical decision. It was a decision born of desperation, pride, and fatalism. They decided to send one last convoy to the island of Leyte. The island was already burning. The American fleet controlled the skies. The sea was swarming with PT boats and destroyers. Sending ships into Ormoc Bay was, by every military calculation, suicide. But the order was given. Go! On the night of December 9th, 4,000 men boarded 10 ships in Manila. They were the reinforcements, the last hope. As they stepped onto the decks, they didn't check their rifles. They clutched paper charms. They whispered prayers. They looked at the horizon and saw not a destination, but a grave. A young private named Ishikawa wrote in his diary, "If we reach Leyte, we can serve His Majesty. If we die on the way, at least our bones will face south." They knew they were sailing into a trap. They just didn't know that the trap would be made of fire. This is the story of the Bay of Fire. The 4 days where the Pacific Ocean turned into an execution ground, and an entire army vanished beneath the waves. The convoy was codenamed TA-9. It consisted of 3 transports and 2 landing ships, protected by a handful of destroyers. Captain Masamichi Ida stood on the bridge of the destroyer Yuzuki. He watched Manila fade into the darkness. He knew the truth. 8 convoys before them had been destroyed. The bottom of Ormoc Bay was paved with the wreckage of Japanese ships. "If the Americans find us," he whispered to his officer, "none of us will see morning." They sailed in darkness, hugging the coast, praying for clouds. But the Americans had eyes everywhere. At a small airstrip on Leyte, a radar operator watched a green line sweep across a screen. 10 contacts, moving south. He picked up the radio. "Target identified. Multiple transports, heading for Ormoc." The message was relayed to the 5th Air Force. The reply was 3 words long: intercept and destroy. At dawn on December 11th, the trap snapped shut. The sky above the convoy turned dark, not with clouds, but with wings. Marine Corsair fighters dropped from the sun. B-25 Mitchell bombers skimmed the waves, their engines roaring like dragons. The massacre began instantly. The transport Tasmania Maru was hit first. A bomb smashed into her fuel tanks. The ship didn't sink, it disintegrated. One moment it was a vessel carrying hundreds of men. The next, it was a cloud of splinters and steam. Then the Mino Maru was hit. Then the Saigon Maru. In minutes, the orderly convoy became a slaughterhouse. Ships broke formation, turning wildly to escape the bombs. But there was nowhere to run. The water around them boiled with explosions. Captain Ida on the Yuzuki watched in horror as men leapt from the burning transports. But they weren't jumping into safety. They were jumping into oil. The bombs had ruptured the fuel tanks of the sinking ships. Thousands of gallons of diesel spread across the surface of the bay. And then it caught fire. Ormoc Bay became a cauldron, a literal lake of fire. American pilots flying overhead later wrote that the ocean looked alive. It was writhing with flame. The men in the water didn't drown. They burned. Captain Ida screamed orders. "Rescue them! Protect the men!" But his rescue boats melted in the heat. There was nothing he could do but watch his army turn into ash. By noon, the attack stopped. The bombers turned for home. But the bay still smoldered. Smoke hung over the horizon like a black shroud. The reinforcements for Leyte were gone. Captain Ida looked at the setting sun and murmured, "So this is how an empire dies." Not with a roar, but with silence. But the horror wasn't over. The night brought a new kind of terror. The survivors of TA, the destroyers Yuzuki and Uzuki, limped through the darkness. They were damaged, leaking, and exhausted. They thought they were safe under the cover of night. They were wrong. Waiting in the shadows were American PT boats and destroyers. The USS Cooper, USS Moal, and USS Sumner were hunting. At midnight, the radar on the Japanese destroyer Uzuki flickered. 2 contacts. Fast. Before the captain could shout a warning, 2 white streaks of foam cut through the black water. Torpedoes. The Uzuki was hit amidships. The explosion broke the ship's back. It folded like a tin can and vanished in seconds. 170 men went down with her. The American destroyers closed in. The USS Cooper opened fire on another Japanese destroyer, the Kuwa. They traded shots at point-blank range. The Kuwa burned, but her gunners refused to die. They kept firing until the water swallowed their guns. Then, a Japanese long-lance torpedo, the most feared weapon in the ocean, found the USS Cooper. The American destroyer exploded. It split in two and sank in less than 30 seconds. 168 American sailors were lost. The bay was now consuming everyone, friend and foe. It didn't matter what flag you flew. Ormoc Bay wanted blood. By the morning of December 12th, the sun rose over a floating graveyard. The blue water of the Philippines was black with soot. Helmets, life jackets, and broken crates drifted in silence. There were no ships left, just debris. Of the 10 ships that left Manila, 9 were on the bottom. The last survivor, the destroyer Kiri, limped back to Manila, battered and alone. Far away in Tokyo, the Japanese High Command received a telegram. It contained 4 words that sealed the fate of the Philippines. Complete loss of convoy. No one spoke. In that room, the admirals understood. The lifeline was cut. The 50,000 soldiers still fighting on Leyte were not soldiers anymore. They were ghosts, abandoned, starving, doomed. Ormoc Bay was the final nail in the coffin of the Japanese Empire. It proved that courage was not enough. Faith was not enough. You cannot fight a war when the ocean itself turns against you. From Convoy TA-1 to TA-9, Japan lost 26 transports and 13 destroyers trying to reinforce this one bay. Over 10,000 men drowned or burned. Why did they do it? Why keep sending ships into the fire? Because an empire cannot admit defeat. To stop would be to admit that the war was lost. So they fed the fire with ships and men until there was nothing left to burn. Today, Ormoc Bay is quiet. The water is blue again. Tourists swim where the oil once burned. But beneath the surface, the wreckage remains. Divers who go down there say it feels like a cathedral. The ships stand upright on the bottom, preserved in the darkness. The guns still point at the sky, waiting for an enemy that is long gone. It is a monument to the terrifying cost of pride. A reminder that in war, the line between bravery and suicide is often just a stretch of burning water. Ormoc Bay didn't just swallow ships, it swallowed the illusion of victory. And it left behind only silence, and the ghosts of 10,000 men who faced south and never came home.